Wonderful to see you all. So again, Ty Heath, and Director of Market Engagement at LinkedIn's B2B Institute think tank. We work with leading practitioners and academics to explore how marketers can create more value. And this is Equity Every Day, closing the knowledge action gap. This is award-winning research, y'all. I'm so proud of it. We worked with Professor Jamila Bowman-Williams of Georgetown University, Georgetown Law. She's also a Harvard faculty fellow. And we worked with research partner SystemOne. They're an ad effectiveness agency. Also in this research is the work of Aiko Bethia, who of Rare Coaching and Consulting. Some of you may know her from Brene Brown's podcast. So she has done some amazing work. Definitely check her out as well. So very excited to share this. If you're like me, you're about moving people forward, moving ideas forward that can transform the way we see the world and the impact we can have on the world. So pleased to share two different angles on how you can make a difference on DEI by using your marketing talents and bringing that to life. So, folks, we've all read the reports. We know that diversity, equity, and inclusion investment drives business outcomes. We know that when you invest in diversity, equity, and inclusion, you see reduced risk, you see increased revenue, you see increased innovation. But this conversation today is not about making the case. We're not relitigating the case for DEI. That ground has been well covered. I think we all understand the value that we bring when we have these conversations, when we invest. Instead, we're out to answer a different question. And that question is, if diversity is good for business, then why aren't people buying? We know, again, that these things drive business value. So the question becomes, if we know this to be true, if these findings are widely known, then why don't we always see the action that we would expect from leaders who understand these things to be true? That's what we're exploring. So let's start with an audience we're all familiar with, marketers. So we started by surveying over 1,700 marketers in the United States, UK, and Canada. And according to the survey, DEI is now mainstream in marketing. I think we all feel it. And this is underscored by rising web searches, posts, media, and also I've seen amazing conversations for change on the LinkedIn platform. Over the past several months, we see 100% growth in company posts on the topic of diversity, and also an 81% growth in the number of companies posting about diversity. Is anyone else seeing this? Yeah. So I think it's clear the vast majority of marketers care about this topic, and we believe it's important. We believe that it's important for our companies to evolve. We believe it's important for us to be more inclusive in the way that we talk to each other, our marketing, how we take care of each other, all of those things. We believe we have to showcase our commitment. And we also believe that our leaders and managers care about DEI. We feel that. And we remember a couple years ago when a number of brands and organizations made big commitments. So companies committed billions of dollars to addressing racial inequality. And we remember this acceleration in investment in DEI was called a social justice reckoning. And the question is, did that investment translate into real action? So this is the question. Years later into this conversation, now we can look back and assess, how are we doing? And so the point was to drive equity. And the answer to the question is it's not always translating into action. So I'm not going to say that there haven't been some bright spots, because there have been, and we've seen them. So there's been actual progress. But the harsh reality is, in spite of billions of dollars invested in DEI, we still see little change in a couple different areas. When you think about managerial diversity, it hasn't changed that much in the past 40 years. You think about women on boards. You think about venture capital investment with some communities. Black women and Latinas getting less than 1% of venture capital funding. C-suites remaining overwhelmingly white and male. So in spite of this investment and attention, we're not always seeing the evolution or transformation that we're committed to. And we expect it. We expect to see action. And the reality of this is highlighted in this viral tweet by entrepreneur Brandy Riley. She said, "Thank you so much for your Black Lives Matter graphic. May I please see a picture of your executive leadership team and company board?" So, we have to find an answer, folks. And if we care about behavioral change, that means we actually have to concern ourselves with behavioral science. And this is why we partnered with Professor Jamila Bowman-Williams, who has a background in organizational behavior, to explore how we can start to make a difference on this topic, make lasting progress on DEI. And so she found a phenomenon to be true in her research, and that phenomenon was called the knowledge action gap. So if you look at this chart, it illustrates, this is just one of many research studies on the same topic, but it illustrates that 80% of participants said that diversity is an important goal in organizations. But if you look at the chart there, only 38% of people then took an action in accordance with that. In this case, to promote a promising Black job candidate to a leadership position. And so this phenomenon, knowledge action gap, which is also called the principal practice gap in Jamila Bowman-Williams' research, proved to be true over and over again. And so you think about this from a behavioral science perspective, what it illustrates is that there's a gap between people's real and stated preferences. That gap between knowledge and action is actually a gap between people's real and stated preferences. What it also illustrates to us is that it means there's a breakdown in the way that we're making the case for DEI today. The way it's being communicated is breaking down. So today, when you think about it, today the way we communicate the case for DEI is using transactional language, what we call the business case. So we say, ROI, top talent. And I have to say, we've talked about the business case for diversity for a long time, and it was an important first step in modern DEI. What the business case conversation did for all of us is it actually allowed us to bring this into the workplace. And so, no doubt it has progressed. I mean, I'm here standing at B2Believe talking to you about it. So undoubtedly, it's progressed because we are talking about the case of equity in the workspace. That said, while this conversation is mainstream pop and popular, the research often reveals that it's more rhetoric than action. So even when people say that diversity is good for business, which many do, it doesn't always lead to them taking the tangible steps that we want to take. And in some cases, folks, it may actually increase bias. And then for many others, it doesn't resonate in spite of the rational appeal. It seems pretty straightforward, more ROI, less risk, more innovation. But that rational appeal just isn't translating for some people. Why? Why is this happening? Well, it's because there are things operating in the background that we need to deal with. And so this is again where we turn to behavioral science to explain. So the hypothesis is that focusing on the business outcome can actually exacerbate strong biases. So if you look at these three big ones on the slide, cognitive dissonance. This is where someone feels their very identity being threatened by the case for diversity. Another one called persuasion knowledge. So this is where people feel like diversity is being sold to them. So imagine you're at work and someone says there's a mandatory diversity training. So some people, their defenses automatically goes up because it feels like it's being forced. And then there's one that we are very familiar with. I think most of us are familiar with this, the zero-sum bias. And this is when a gain for one group can feel like a loss for other groups. And so these biases are unavoidable. This is something that we all deal with as human beings. And so the question is, how do we build the muscle and start to recognize these things are operating in the background always? The second point I want to bring up from the research that I thought was really fascinating was this phenomenon called the Colorblind Conundrum. And so this was a common trend among research participants that expressed colorblind narratives in spite of reporting diversity being important. And so these are folks that insist that they don't see color, and they just care about who's best for a particular job, right? And so while social science demonstrates that people proclaim to be colorblind, I think we know that we do see color. I'm a black woman standing here in front of all of you on this stage. I can't change my skin. I can't. When you say you don't see color, what you're saying is that you don't see me. And so as we think about this conversation, in one way or another, the systemically excluded person is always missing something. It's a story that's told that the colorblind person constructs to justify inaction. So this is another thing we want to rethink in this conversation. It came up. So, folks, it's time to change our approach. What if we stopped trying to sell and justify diversity, equity, and inclusion? What if we just focused on the fact that it's the right thing to do, right? So in an article titled "The Money or the Morals," Professor David Mayer from University of Michigan said that when companies frame things in moral language rather than economic language, it can actually be more influential in achieving the outcomes that we want to achieve. Companies that frame things as the right thing to do tend to be more successful in promoting desired behaviors. So what if we made the case in a different way? And this is where I think marketers can make a powerful difference. What if we made a transformational case for equity? What if we focused on a culture of shared values that made space for all of us to belong, grow, and thrive? Not because it would lead to business gains, but because it's the right thing to do. And as we do this, what we can do as marketers is to bring messaging that strikes more moral chords and sparks emotion and broadens awareness of current and historical inequality. So this is a reminder of our common humanity. I have to tell you, back in 2020, I remember sitting at my computer. We were all locked down. And I remember hearing loud noises outside my window, out on the street. So I got up from my desk and I looked out the window, and it was people of all color, creed, everybody marching down the street, protesting racial injustice. And we saw that in the summer of 2020. People felt something. So they took action. They took the opportunity to stand against racial injustice and biased systems. When you feel something, you do something, right? So, why? Why are people moved by this? Well, the transformational approach taps into the fact that emotion is the driver of almost everything we do. Rory Sutherland said it best. I think this is a great quote here. He said The human mind does not run on logic any more than a horse runs on petrol. What we know to be true, and this is why marketers are so powerful at making a difference here, is that people are story processors, not logic processors. And this transformational language, this was so fascinating, reliably led to more equitable action. And you can see the distinction here on these two graphics on the slide here. So neuroscience suggests that compassion is not only transformative for the human brain, but it's also key to fueling systemic cultural change. If you see the language that's used here, you can see how we might embrace storytelling in a way that actually generates empathy and perspective taking, which in turn motivates action. So you can see the difference in the statements here. Things like diversity helps the bottom line versus everyone deserves an equal chance. And oh Lord, it's the right thing to do. You can feel the difference, can't you? So people who used the transformational language in Jamila Bowman-Williams' research not only talked the talk, they walked the walk when it came to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So the good news, too, is that this phenomenon had statistically significant predictive power. So this is an evidence-based trend that we are exploring more deeply. Those people that came from the belief system that diversity is the right thing to do were more likely to promote the highly qualified Black candidate. So, as Christina Jones at Salesforce says, we have to move from thought leadership to action leadership. As marketers, we are all responsible for socialization at scale. We decide what voices get amplified. We decide what stories get told. We decide how stories get told, what characters get put in the ads, and we can choose more transformational communication. And we can bring insights like these from DEI into our marketing work and do more inclusive storytelling, rethinking thought leadership, and even playing a broader role in our organizational culture in partnership with other parts of the business, like your DEI organization or your talent acquisition organization. So here's where I think we can really translate. This is a research report, Feeling Seen, from our research partner SystemOne, the ad effectiveness agency. And they did 2 reports, and they're doing more, but highly encourage you to read these. These are US and UK reports, and they set out to uncover how people feel when they see advertising that showcases diversity. So they analyzed nearly 60 ads, and they had over, I want to say, like 18,500 survey samples. So very broad, general population, and also historically excluded communities. And they came away with some really actionable insights for us marketers, brands, agencies, anyone who's interested in really moving the needle on this conversation. So I'm really proud to have contributed to the report alongside some folks that I definitely would love for you to follow on LinkedIn. So Christina Jones of Salesforce and Jason Rosario at BBDO, bringing the agency perspective, doing great work in this space as well. So before I get into the results, which I'm really excited about, let me explain to you how SystemOne measures the ads. So they use a 5-star system, and obviously 1 star is not great. 5 stars is great. And they show the ads to 150 people, and they ask people to rate the ads in terms of how they felt, so what emotions came up. So a good emotion is green, and then we want green, we want happy, we want surprised. The red and yellow, not good. We don't want that. That's fear, contempt, disgust, and that's not good for a brand. We don't want people to feel those types of emotions when they're seeing our ads. So that's how it works. We want to have people feel something. We want it to be happy, surprised. Now, I'll cut to the chase. Inclusive ads performed better than average against the general population ads. So in general, only 1% of ads usually hit a 5-star score. And the average star rating for ads in the United States is 2 stars. By comparison, the inclusive ads tested in the Feeling Seen report achieved a 3.8 star rating. And these were used doing a representative sample. So in other words, the ads that were inclusive were more effective than the average US commercial. And it had a bump, what we call a diversity dividend, among historically excluded audiences, which is really exciting. So that was driven by what you would expect when you see yourself in an advertisement. How does it make you feel when you see yourself reflected in an ad? We all want to see ourselves reflected in the world around us. So that's what drives this diversity dividend. So now I'm going to walk through, like, what did these ads actually do so that we can bring that to our own marketing? So let's go through 5 different points from this report. So the first thing to remember is that inclusive advertising unites us. And so when you create an ad that showcases a commitment to something, it tends to perform better with the general population than the average ad. People like advertising that's inclusive and that reflects a variety of experiences, even when they don't see themselves in the ad. Because what people are interested in and hungry for is a good story. So, for example, this ad, I don't know if anyone's seen this ad. It was like 2018. It's called Reindeer Games by Microsoft. This is award-winning creative Xbox commercial. Did anyone see this? Yeah, a few people. Okay. So there's featured a boy named Owen, 9.5 years old. He has a condition that limits his mobility. And his friends join him in playing video games, and he's able to play the video games because there's an adaptive controller. And they cheer him on, and when he wins, the excitement is palpable. So this ad performed really well. Why? Because it told a story, and a story that can unite us. We want to do more of that. We want to bring ads that showcase stories and bring empathy. The next one is feeling seen means being heard. So you've heard these phrases before. I'm every woman. Say it loud and say it proud. Born this way. So these are all phrases we know, and they all represent US pop culture moments. And there's an opportunity, because these phrases actually represent things when historically excluded groups stood up and claimed space and made themselves known. So broadly speaking, there's a couple different approaches to this. So there's the discrete diversity approach, where you don't address it explicitly. The ad isn't specifically about that group, but the slate of characters inside is representative. There's the loud and proud approach, where the ad is telling a story or making a point about the challenges and opportunities or experiences of a particular group. There's the taking a stand approach, like the ad that you're seeing on this slide that's done by Adobe. So there's no correct way to do this. There's a lot of different ways you can do this, but what tends to work well is when commercials go beyond just the diverse casting into strong storytelling. So talking about real lives and experiences. It's not foolproof, I'll say that. So explicitly focusing on the experiences of a particular group can backfire if you don't do the work to actually understand the group that you're investing in. So you want to make sure you have people in the room and your team is ready, and that you're building alongside the audience that you're representing. Make sense, everyone? But the reality is, when you show you're on people's side, they listen. Next up is celebrate lives and stories. So who's seen this McDonald's ad? Anyone? You recognize it from the slide? Maybe a few people. So inclusive advertising is still advertising. So you want to entertain, inspire. But I would say out of all of the tips on how to do this well, this is probably the strongest one, because what people tend to do when they invest in inclusive advertising is say, I'm just going to throw everybody of every ethnicity into the ad. And what it does is it washes it out and makes it forgettable. But we want it to be memorable, especially in the short time you have. So one of the best things you can do is pick a story and tell that one story really powerfully. So in this particular McDonald's ad, it's about a family, and their son got their first job at McDonald's, and the mom and dad come through the drive-thru, and they're like, hey, we see you, oh my gosh, it's your first day, and he's like all embarrassed. It's such a fun ad. So that one story stands in for a whole host of other stories represented, because we can all feel that moment of pride when we were at our first job and our parents were so proud of us. We feel that. So the reason why this worked really well is because one story was told, time was spent on it, care was spent on it, and it was told really powerfully. And then go beyond the calendar. So I think a number of us, when we build our strategies, we're thinking, okay, so February is Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage, we've got this month, and we got this month to celebrate this group of people. There's an opportunity for us to do more. It's time for us to think about how we move beyond the calendar and celebrate diversity all year long by having it just be infused into the way we think about our marketing in general. So the calendar shouldn't be a limit to a brand's commitment to investing. And in particular, there are some groups who aren't reflected on the calendar who we sometimes forget about completely. So one group is elderly women. So we don't often see ads for elderly women. We don't see ads often for folks that are disabled. We don't see ads for Asian American community as much as we could, and I think there's more opportunities for us to have those conversations. So if you look at this creative, this is a fun one by Hallmark, and so it's a mother and daughter in the hallway. They run into a friend in the apartment building, and the mom and daughter tell the friend in sign language that they're delivering holiday cards to people. And so the neighbor tries to say in sign language, but he's not great at it. He tries to say, I'm making some cookies. And so the daughter corrects him because he's not quite getting it right. And then later on, they show up at his house with a card. So it's a really touching story that's done, and it features an audience that typically doesn't get any shine in terms of stories being told. So that's we should be doing this, and we should be moving beyond the calendar. And then finally, avoid the sadness trap. So this is the thing we want to avoid. So what didn't work well when advertisers took this on? Some ads fell flat because they brought up a negative emotion. So perhaps taking on a topic that's a challenge for a particular community. Bringing up emotion is powerful, but when you don't resolve the emotion on the other side, it can actually be damaging. So it's a powerful tool if you can create the emotion, but you have to remember that you have to resolve it on the other side. And so in particular, if you're doing an ad for an audience that faces a particular problem, you want to make sure you're resolving the problem on the other end, or that just leaves viewers feeling bad, and that's not good for your brand. Make sense? Okay, great. So to quickly recap, and by the way, we can make this information available to everyone. Inclusive advertising unites us. Feeling seen means being heard. Celebrate lives and stories. Definitely do that one. That's one to remember. Go beyond the calendar and avoid the sadness trap. So I want to thank you so much for investing your time with us today. Everybody wants to feel seen, and we want to move from feeling seen to actually being seen, right? We want to, when people are in a story, for the time you're watching that story, you can put yourselves in people's shoes, and that compassion is what allows us to translate into opportunity for us to connect and feel for each other and the different communities that we all care about representing. So if you're interested in learning more about this, definitely feel free to check out b2binstitute.org. Feel free to connect with me. And thank you so much for investing your time with us today. Enjoy the rest of B2Believe. Thank you.